sex is something we prioritize. Sex is something that can mitigate and buffer against the stresses of daily life. Sex is extremely stress reducing. One thing that people sometimes miss that I think is important.
It's the Kink Consultant Podcast, where we're turning up the heat on all things kink and dating, relationships, and pop culture. So close the door, plug in your headphones, and let's get down to it. Before we get started, have you been feeling disconnected from your partner or wanting to talk about introducing kink in your relationship? You just don't know how? Book a consultation. I'm a board-certified sexologist and Somatica-certified sex and relationship coach with experience helping individuals and couples reconnect after years of missed connection. So stop pressing the snooze button on the conversations you want to have. Head to AmandaDames.com to book a consult.
Hello and welcome to this week's episode of the Kink Consultant Podcast. I'm your host, Amanda Dames, and today I have a very special guest. I'm usually lucky enough to find the perfect person to come talk to me at the perfect time, and today I found Caroline Hood, who is a licensed clinician, a writer about sex and relationships, and she has an upcoming book called Sex Begets Sex, Reclaiming Desire as an Act of Female Empowerment. And lately, I've been on a huge kick about female desire, sex, fantasy, empowerment, whatever the newest wave of feminism is that we're seeing. And Caroline, thank you so much for being here today. I am really excited about this chat.
Yeah, thanks, Amanda. I'm excited to be here. It's going to be fun.
I know. And honestly, like when I tell you that I have been on a kick lately about female desire and just owning it, for me, it's about not letting men get in the way of it. Like they are part of it. We're in partnership with it, but to not be shamed or to not have my pleasure decentered for anybody else's. That's where I've been lately. Zero complaints in my bedroom, but a lot with how I've been treated online for talking about kink, right?
Oh, that's
Yeah.
unfortunate.
I think it's just a wave of the manosphere right now. And
Yeah.
recently, I talked about this on a recent podcast. I got in trouble for even using the word masculinity or masculine. I think it's on both sides, is my point, that there is sensitivity to feminism, to masculinity, a lot of gender and sexuality things. And I'm throwing you that hot potato right now because I'm like, have you noticed this in your work?
I mean, one, I'm sorry you're experiencing that. And I think that's just a reflection of this pushback of seeing empowered women and powerful women speak their mind from a place of expertise and be articulate. And that is really uncomfortable for a lot of people who are like, hang on, stay in your lane, know your place, whatever subjugation. And so, yes, I'm seeing this. I think there's a big burgeoning growth of women who are talking about their own pleasure and desire, and authors and researchers and romanticy, and this outgrowth of women sort of acknowledging and being given permission that their desire is important. So with any sort of swing one direction, there's a swing back. And so I'm like, you see it in politics, you see it in race, you see it in social justice, you see it everywhere, where like when there's some momentum with progression, the backlash of people not wanting to see that progress gets really strong and hopefully just extinguishes out. But maybe we're seeing that backlash as women are really starting to reclaim and claim their desire sometimes for the first time.
I think so completely. And sorry I threw that one at you. I just realized all in one fell swoop, I was like, hold on. I have Caroline here. We had our little pre-interview about what we were going to talk about. I was like, but it's so much bigger than that, even with what I face day to day. And I forget it. I even like push aside what's happening to me and focus on like, well, what are we here to learn? And I'm like, actually, no, let's take stock of where we're at.
What you're pointing out is this big piece around sex generally, but women's desire and intimacy is that, yes, there's what's happening in our own bodies and in our own bedrooms, but it's very socially informed and it's really culturally constructed. And to talk about women's desire and, okay, well, maybe we just need to masturbate and get to know our bodies. Sure. But we also need to recognize all the messaging that we've just soaked up for generations that have told us that that is wrong. Like we have to see all the sides of it.
And that requires a lot of empathy for self to look at what
Mm,
you've been put through because even just how I was saying, I ignore what happens to me in pursuit of something. I was like, "Oh, no, we're here to have a conversation." But I think we all require a little empathy and recognizing it doesn't make us weak or a victim to
mm-mm.
acknowledge that these are the messages we've been hearing. That's a really great point.
Yeah, well, and I think in order to take a stand and make a change, to have self-compassion and go, okay, I'm not broken, I'm not weird, I'm not abnormal. The way I'm living my life is a very normal and adaptive response to
Mhm.
all of this negative messaging. You know, if I've been told forever that it's immoral, it's wrong, it's selfish, it's unchristian, I don't know, whatever your sort of belief system is to have any sexual agency, then for you to lock that down and push that aside and be the dutiful wife or dutiful woman, I think we need to reframe that and go, oh my gosh, what a skilled survival mechanism we have created. Like, good on me. I'm proud of that. But now that I know more, I get to reincorporate this piece of me and go on this exciting journey of growth, and both get to be true. Yeah.
I want to ask you, like, what got you into studying sexuality and choosing this path for yourself?
Yeah. You know, some of it's my own upbringing growing up in a really religious, specifically Catholic household and family and religious school where there was this both implicit and explicit messaging that sex and female sexuality was wrong. Even though I was really absorbing that messaging, I think before I really had words for it, I just had this sense of like, that doesn't seem right. Like, this is this very normal human universal, primal, animalistic piece that we all go through. So, like, how is this bad? So, I think I always had that tension in the back of my mind. And I've always just been very curious about human behavior and human connection. And so I went to school and got a bachelor's degree in psychology and a master's degree in social work that really looks at the human being within the context of their environment. So it really analyzes how we both impact our community and how we are impacted by our community at the now time as well as like generationally. And so this curiosity to dig into like, why do we do what we do? And sex, as I said, it's this really interesting, both really universal and extremely individual thing. And I find that overlap in sort of that Venn diagram to just be really interesting. And I just believe that the more we talk about it, the more we all benefit from it. It's just been this curiosity of mine since I can remember.
I understand it. The feeling from a young age that, like, there was nothing actually wrong with it. You were just being told it was wrong. And that
Yeah.
itself just didn't feel right.
No, it didn't. And it wasn't as if, you know, I was sitting in school at the age of 6 knowing that it was just a sense. But I reflect on, you know, my sex ed consisted of knowing I was going to get a period and that didn't mean I was going to bleed to death and then end of sentence. You know, that was all I learned.
Oh my gosh.
And with that, what you don't talk about, you, I think, inherently learn the discussions that aren't had, right? You're still learning from the non conversation, which is you're learning shame. You're learning bad. So therefore, this must be bad if we don't even ever get to talk about it. So it's such a shame that we have this messaging, and I'm so grateful when I went to college and moved to New York City and was on my own and, you know, was a dumb young 20 something, just like most of us are, and experimented and had great experiences and bad experiences and everything in between, and was able to then kind of re-educate myself from other places, not just a religious background, that it was so eye-opening. And 20 years later, I'm still learning. I'm still an evolving sexual being. And I hope 20 years from now, I can say the same thing.
Oh, yeah. I hope so too. And I think that
Yeah.
with just our generation of people having the conversation, it's going to carry on with us. I look at 20-year-olds now, and I think they're so highly evolved in how they talk about
Mm.
emotions, feelings, the world, and, what's happening in general, that they have more of a finger on the pulse. And I wasn't even planning to go here, but I
Mm.
also think what's interesting is there are all these reports of them having less sex. So we have this highly informed group who is very in
Yeah.
touch. but then they are not exploring sex in the same way as they are being open about their sexuality.
Mm, that's interesting. Yeah, I think all those reports that quote younger generation is
Yeah.
having less sex and the birth rate's going down and all that. And most are sort of really combining that with COVID and this isolation. And we sort of forgot how to be social and everything went online. And we're getting these parasocial relationships through
Yeah.
Instagram or OnlyFans or Reddit or whatever. And so we sort of think that our needs are being satiated through these mechanisms when in reality, I think human beings need both physical connection as well as the emotional and mental. But you are right. Contrasted to that, this really great awareness and conversation around sexuality and gender identity and all of those components. But people are having less sex. I think that's a lot of things. I do think it's COVID. I think it's like people are stressed. I think people are confused. I think people are nervous. We're inundated with information that the world is scary. And I think a lot of young people are confused by that. Whereas, I do feel lucky enough when I was dating in my 20s, this was pre-social media, and I was just kind of out doing my thing, and I wasn't worried it was going to get videotaped or any of that sort of
Yeah.
stuff. And I think people now, there's different consequences to behavior that can feel really scary.
Yeah, I agree with that. I recently found out also that I had not paid attention to this, but apparently Cosmo magazine or one of these things has come out
Mm.
and said the era of the party girl is back. So the idea is that we were in a wellness era of like yoga and healthy eating and biohacking. And now the party
Mm-hmm.
era is coming back, which I'm like, I agree with you. I think that the party area disappeared because we all were too embarrassed. We're in a situation where a lot of embarrassing things happen daily. Like there was a UFC fight on the White House lawn. And I'm
Oh,
like,
Lord.
maybe we're like less concerned about how we appear online because it doesn't seem to matter.
Yeah, well, everything is a 10-second news clip. And so even if you are embarrassed, like, don't worry. People have forgotten about it 30 seconds later. Move on with your life.
Yes. When I think about my own sex life, I know sometimes I get a little bit addicted to my phone and the dopamine hit of
Mm.
Instagram or TikTok. Or, God, there was even a short, brief period of time where I was on ChatGPT just asking questions about
Just,
myself, you know?
yeah,
Like,
yeah, just befriending chat.
yeah, befriending this AI. And I think that these little things are dopamine hits for you.
Yeah, I do think that's true. Like the people and the corporations that designed all of these algorithms, they studied addiction to build these algorithms. They studied the dopamine response. They studied the addictive pathways. They studied that intermittent reward so that, instead of getting a reward each time, you get a reward and then 3 times later a reward and then 8 times later. So it sort of keeps you guessing. They're very smart. So they built it for us to feel good and to want to keep coming back. And so we do keep coming back. And so we do get a reward. And I think what we're finding and hopefully kind of waking up to is that yes, there is a reward, but it's not deeply fulfilling. It might be giving us dopamine or a little bit of serotonin release. It's not giving us that oxytocin, that intimacy hormone
Yeah.
that we get from actual connective, meaningful, however you define meaningful interaction. And it's short lived and it's surface level.
All of the above. Short-lived, surface level. I fall asleep right after, like not dissimilar to sex.
Mm-hmm.
I do this at night in bed. But yeah, for me, there's an emptiness to it
Yeah.
that I definitely find its disconnection too. All right, Kingsters, I want you and your partner to join me and my Dom in Jamaica for Swingcation October 10th through 17th. We'll be there teaching the art of erotic spanking, fantasy mapping, and helping couples deepen their kinky connection. All relationship types and orientations are welcome, so head to swingcation.com and use code TKC50 for up to $400 off. We can't wait to see you there.
I mean, as smart as the algorithms are that can trick us into feeling like this feels good, like the conversation that's sort of like AI is going to take over the world, I don't think it will in that sense, because I think as smart as those algorithms are, human beings are still beings that need to live in community and connection. And these are types of connections, but I don't think they can ever replace that real human being witnessed by another being, sharing that emotional, physical, intimate knowledge and release and vulnerability. I don't think AI can ever get to a place where it's fulfilling all of those pieces.
I hope not.
Yeah.
I also don't think so, but weaving it back around to the original conversation, something that comes to mind is I genuinely don't know how to put this, so we're just going to go blunt. It has
Yeah.
been tale as old as time, the butt of jokes that once you get married, a woman doesn't want to have sex. Okay?
Hmm.
So
Hmm.
what we're describing here is a version where nobody wants to have sex, husband, wife, teenagers dating,
Right.
that part
Hmm.
has disappeared. And I think it's interesting through all of it, I feel that sometimes we're still hearing that joke, or we're hearing women even on social media talk about how the mental load, we're finally hearing the women's side of it. They're like, yeah, it's true.
Yeah.
I don't want to have sex. The mental
Right.
load is killing me.
Yeah.
I'd love to hear more on if your research has touched that and explored how that type of mental load is disconnecting specifically women from their desire.
Yeah, I think it's really common. Like, we're still hearing these jokes and these tropes and
Yeah.
these archetypes of the woman that's, oh, I have a headache and, all of that. Because it is still true. I hear it. I am 43 years old. I have a lot of female friends who are in my same age bracket with children who have maybe been in a relationship for 10 plus years. And there's so many stories of, oh, can we stay at happy hour for one more drink? Because then my husband will be asleep by the time I get home. And I just I don't even want him to look at me. I don't even want to deal with that. So it can turn into this thing that we once really longed for and wanted to this obligation. I think that's really normal. And I don't want any women to feel like they're messed up. I think it's normal and it can be helped. The mental load is a huge piece. A lot of researchers and therapists and all sorts of people are talking about, okay, so women often have really responsive desire. And so men might be more spontaneous if you're in this heterosexual dynamic, right? Where men can kind of think of sex and they're horny regardless of everything that's going on around them. Maybe they had a really stressful day at work, but there they are, they're in that zone and they're ready to go. Women, researchers like Emily Nagotsky and others talk about this responsive desire where they need to be put in a position, they need to begin kissing, they need to begin intimate touch, they need to begin all of these actions, and then they will respond and their desire and their arousal will meet the situation. But in order to do that, all of the stress and all of the parenting and all of the things that in a sort of classic heterosexual dynamic are still not meeting a gender equality within people's homes is causing women to be resentful of their partners. And so it's really hard to want to have sex with somebody who you resent. I think that's easy for all of us to go, I don't care how hot they are. Like, I don't like them. I resent them. I'm frustrated by them or with them. And so it is really important that relationships take that unequal distribution of the mental load very seriously.
Later in that description, you described the resentment, right? But earlier you
Hmm.
mentioned like it can be helped, right? That
Yeah.
sort of
Hmm.
disconnect.
Hmm.
For women who are listening right now and thinking, like, that's me. I have these
Right.
desires and fantasies, but I have zero interest in exploring them with my significant other.
Hmm.
Where do
Hmm.
you go from there?
Yeah, so I think a big piece is simply prioritizing sex and intimacy and yourselves as a couple in your relationship. And that means not saying, oh, the kids always come first, or oh, we're just roommates, or we're just co-parents, all these things. But you decide with intention that this is something you care about. It's something you communicate about, and not just while you're having sex, but outside of the bedroom, right? Over
Yeah.
coffee, over lunch, all these other places. I think one thing that people sometimes miss that I think is important, sex is saved when everything else is going well. So, okay, our cognitive load is equally distributed and I got enough sleep and the kids have babysitters and da da da. And so sex is like, if everything else is good, we'll do it.
Yeah.
And I think it's important for couples to flip it, which is actually to say, sex is something we prioritize. Sex is actually something that can mitigate and buffer against the stresses of daily life. So we don't wait to have it till everything else is fixed, because in fact, having it regularly will make the rest of life less stressful. It will release those positive hormones. It will make you feel more affection and affinity for your partner. And therefore, I think it will have a positive impact on the cognitive load itself. It's not going to fix it magically, but I think we reverse it. Like, sex is extremely stress reducing and connecting. So use it to build and bind. Don't just use it as the consequence of having everything else go well, because life is too chaotic to wait for that.
Yeah. As long as it's good sex is my thought. Because if
Mm.
I'm not orgasming, I'm actually put in a worse mood, right? I mean, if it's like
If
a
you
long
expect
time.
that, yeah. Hmm.
If it's a long time. No, there are times that I don't orgasm and I still have this wonderful connection with my partner
Yeah.
because we're
Hmm.
kinky and we have these like intimacy for us is not just the orgasm. However,
Yes.
I know for a lot of people, and especially might be unfair to say, but like non-kinky people who don't
Hmm.
have that extra layer of intimacy and fulfillment that they can get from other
Hmm.
types of play, the
Hmm.
orgasm is a really important part of it.
Yeah.
You mentioned there, like, if I expect it. Do you
Yeah.
differentiate sex with and without orgasm?
What I think is that sex doesn't need to result in orgasm to be
Okay,
meaningful, to be fun sex, right? And sex certainly doesn't need to include penetrative sex. I think those two things are
agreed.
really,
Yes.
really important out of the gate. Also, I think like the idea that foreplay, we've ill-defined all of these terms. Like, people who still put oral sex into foreplay, that has to go. Oral sex is very much sex
Oh,
as
Caroline, I
well.
wanna hear this, like, louder and harder.
Yeah.
Like, you yell at these people who are saying this. You are so polite. I can hear the kindness. Listen, people, oral sex is no longer listed under foreplay, never should have been there in the
No.
first place. Take it off your list. It's a type of sex. All right, I just delivered the
Yes.
message a little harder, Caroline. But
I appreciate that. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's ridiculous. And it also holds this idea and assumption that it's less important and it's less
yeah.
valuable. And there's certainly sort of a male centered kind of ethos around like the first base, second base, home base, all that sort of stuff. So orgasms are great. And I hope people are having the orgasms of their dreams, but I don't think you necessarily need a sexual encounter to be fulfilling and satisfying and fun and playful and connective to result in an orgasm. I've certainly had a lot of sexual encounters with my partner over the years that haven't resulted in an orgasm. And I've walked out feeling really good, feeling really happy, feeling really satisfied, and wanting to do that again.
I can agree with the enjoyment of it, but I
Mm,
will often finish with my hand if I don't finish with
yeah,
like any other type of thing. But it's usually like a mutual masturbation thing or like, oh,
sure.
okay, I'm gonna finish or like we'll grab a toy. But I think it's fair. And my partner and I actually, he was on my podcast once and we discussed how we don't always expect it to go to
Right.
completion, especially like to call out blowjobs. Like you can
Yeah.
give one and it doesn't need to go to orgasm and it's still like
Yeah.
a wonderful way to connect.
Yeah, well, and I think sometimes too, I mean, sex is physical. Sometimes you're tired, and even having an orgasm is so pleasurable, it also takes energy to get over the climax, right? And so I know certainly there are times when, and it's not often because I think orgasms are great and can be done. And if you get to know a partner, particularly if you're in sort of a longer term relationship where you really know one another's likes and dislikes and grooves, hopefully you can sort of get there with relatively little fraught, right?
Yeah.
You can find ways to do it simply and easily, but you can certainly get your partner off, you can roll around, you can make out, you can touch, and even if you don't have an orgasm, I still think that that can be fun. But yeah, like we've both said, what are your expectations going in? And have you communicated that with your partner? Have you identified that yourself? Like, all of that's important.
Okay, you just hit the nail on the head here with
Yeah.
have you identified it yourself?
Yeah.
As a coach, I work with a lot of couples, and the usual path is the man comes to me first, and then he's like, "Hey, I think my wife and I need this." And then the wife comes for the consult, and I say,
Mm,
"So what are your fantasies?" And most of the time I hear, "I don't have any
I
fantasies."
don't know. Yeah.
Yeah,
Mhm.
right? And then we work through it, and we
Mhm.
get there, maybe not on the consult call, but, through sessions.
Mhm.
Is this something you're hearing as well that like women are not in touch with what their fantasies are or what their desire is?
Yes, I am hearing that, and I'm hearing that from friends and all over, and I think much of that goes back to this idea of what we were told was even allowed, what we have been given permission to do. And we haven't had that space, like societally, to say, oh, can I even have fantasies? Like, what is that? And I also wonder if you're seeing this with your couples, which is, I think, this comment. I was listening to a couples therapist the other day that talked about often if you have a couple where one person has been identified as self-acknowledgement as kinky or just kind of not vanilla, that person's desires and fantasies in that dynamic can overshadow and kind of take over the whole conversation. And so when you go to that other partner and ask the question that you said you just asked, well, both they've never given permission to have it, and that other person's desires and kink have taken all the airspace of that conversation in their dynamic.
1,000%. So
Yeah.
much so that when I work with these couples, I basically say, he already knows what his desires are,
Right.
so he can park himself for a minute. We need to learn yours. And we
Yes.
prioritize the person who doesn't know, because my point is, I'm trying to help people build a bridge to each other. And
Mm.
if only one
Mhm.
person knows their fantasies, we're building the bridge from one side to the other as opposed to meeting in the middle. And I don't want
Mhm.
that for them. They don't want that for themselves. It doesn't allow for like long-term solutions and communication, et
Yeah.
cetera, et cetera. So yes,
Yeah.
I
Mhm.
see that clearly all the time. And on your point about being given permission,
Mhm.
I will say that women were allowed to have one fantasy, and it was that you would be the princess and a strong man would come in and whisk you away. And I
Mm.
think, and I work with a lot of women, and I tell them, it is okay if you tell me your fantasy is to be wined and dined and whisked away on a helicopter and then brought to a hotel room. It is
Mhm.
this anti-gold digger commentary that I think stops a lot of women from even engaging in that version of their fantasy now, because they're told,
Mhm.
oh, if you want to be spanked and choked, which we all know I love, fine. But
Yeah.
God forbid you want a man to spend money on you and make you feel like a princess. That makes you a gold digger. And I think that once I explained to a lot of women, romance can be your fantasy and desire. And if the
Mm.
idea of that turns you on, we can talk about that. We can talk about dates and ways to make that a reality. Maybe not the helicopter part, but maybe once every 3 years, a helicopter
Yeah,
can be involved.
sure.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. There's sometimes I think feminists can find ourselves into these like weird stumbling blocks where, okay, so we want to just empower women. But hang on, if you want to dress up like a princess and wear pink, that's not the right representation of being a feminist. So don't do that. And
Don't
so
hurt
if
the movement. Yeah.
exactly, but really the movement is just to say, hey, if this is what you want, then go for it. And I agree. And to have women step into your consultations in your sessions and say, hey, my fantasies are romance. Well, okay, like kind of obvious because that's the messaging we've received for so long. So it's perfectly reasonable that we've constructed these internal worlds based on what we were told was acceptable. So for a woman to come in and say, yeah, this is what I have, okay, that's fine. And I do think where it comes to this like romantasy in all of these novels is you're seeing women read because they've never really identified fantasies. And now they're reading about fairies and they're reading about dark romance and more kink and more of these other sort of less vanilla fantasies, we'll call
Yeah.
them in air quotes. And they're finding themselves sort of confused or titillated or excited by them in a surprise response because they've never thought of that on their own. They're being exposed to it and now going, oh, something's happening here. I'm really excited by this.
Yeah. And it's often a new way for them to enjoy sex, especially. I feel I'd be remiss if I didn't mention the fact that a lot of women are seeking permission to even want. Or, for example, they feel
Yes.
embarrassed to want. So a lot of
Yes.
these fantasies allow them to have these consensual non-consent stories where they're forced to say yes and they just, as a byproduct, happen to be enjoying themselves, but they didn't choose it for themselves. So it's not their
Right.
fault. I'm using air quotes for everyone listening. It's no one's fault, but it's often a great way for people to release themselves from the shame.
I agree. And I think probably a big piece of that they're being so accepted and so desired is also because they have elements that are magical. They
Yeah.
are set in other worlds and other lands and with fairies and these things where women can dissociate. Whereas if you're just reading a novel that's, housewife and lawyer husband and something that is they can see themselves in, I think sometimes we don't have that ability to fully just go into this other world. So you maintain elements of this shame or this, feeling
Yeah.
like you're not allowed because it's too close to reality.
Yeah, that's a really good point. And I'm trying to think, like, I read the first ACOTAR books and I loved it. There was sexual tension, but
Mhm.
I am not a fantasy person in general, but
Right.
any form of that is going to be attractive. For me, what was a version of that that's not romantasy, but a little bit darker, where there's a mask kink of the idea of you don't know
Mm.
who you're having sex with. And that's a
Hmm.
form of that's very far from reality. There's nothing in my
Yes.
life where I'm living in a mansion alone and a man is
Right.
stalking me and wearing a mask. You know what I mean? So it's
Yeah.
this like
Hmm.
absolutely absurd premise that I mean, I would hope no one has a stalker. I know there are a lot of women who do, but the idea that the stalker also protects them from other evil people, you
Yeah.
know?
Yeah. Well, and so much of this is play, right? Like
Yeah.
fantasy. It's being able to explore new sides of yourself, to release, to play, to let go of control. I think so many women, if you're parents, if you're in this grind of all the day to day, even if you're not a parent, but being an adult and having all the pressures, finding some place where you don't have control and then fantasizing about that in the bedroom where, yeah, you are blindfolded or you are submissive or these other things, or you are just taken. Even romance has this element of I'm just sweeping you up and taking you and
Yes.
whining and dining you and everything you just said. There's still pieces of control there, which is just women being able to go, oh, okay, I can just lean in and accept and give myself that permission to feel pleasure. I don't have to orchestrate the whole thing.
I'm just sitting with that because I think it almost saddens me how that is the
Mm,
foundation of every woman's fantasy, especially today. It's like, can I just trust someone else to take control of something so that I can relax
yeah.
into, I mean, what we're talking about is being able to receive pleasure and
Yes.
give pleasure, having the energy to give pleasure too.
Yeah. I think you do have to be able to sort of turn your brain off. And it is really hard to do when you've got the tick, 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 tick of all of the things you have to do. And you're looking at your watch because in 20 minutes you have to go do this other thing. I think partners have to approach this as a partner problem, like as a
Yeah.
partner pursuit. It's not just the woman's job to make sure she takes a bath and she relaxes and she does her meditation and she gets herself in just the right spot so she's ready to have sex. If you want to do that, great. But I think this is a shared responsibility. If you are in a relationship and you've decided, okay, sex and pleasure for both of us are important, then it's a shared commitment to making sure both parties are set up in whatever state, whatever's going to get them going. And so it's not just we ask of women so often to solve problems at an individual level that are household problems, that are societal problems, that are
Yeah.
generational problems. And it's not just that individual's problem to solve.
I agree with that. But then also, I am not this woman. I can have sex when the house is the biggest disaster you've ever seen.
Yeah.
I don't even see it.
Yeah.
Like, I only
Yeah.
know I'm horny, we're going for it.
Hmm.
But I recognize and respect the fact that for some women, having dishes in the sink, not having certain things done can actually be debilitating for them to the point that they're like, no, I can't even relax
Yeah.
until all of this stuff is done. Is there a solve for that? Is there a way that women can find peace without perfection?
Two things come to mind when you bring that up. And I'm stumbling because I think it's a little tricky, but I think one of the things that inhibits women from shutting this piece off is you sort of hinted on. I don't actually think they're having the kind of sex that they want to have. So
Yeah.
if you're not having, like, you're able to disregard the dishes because I think you have a self-knowledge and a sexual agency and an active sexual life that you're finding pleasure from. And I think if your sex life is if you bucket it as just another thing you have to do, as another load of laundry, then you're not going to want it and you are going to be distracted by the dishes and everything else. So there is a thing there where like, okay, we actually do need to focus on the type of sex. And I think that also speaks to frequency of sex. I think those are very much connected and we need to support frequency to drive pleasure and so on as sort of a feedback loop. So I do think that's one thing. And then I will say, if it comes to the dishes or the laundry or the scheduling, that is sort of a respect in a relationship that if you are in a partner and you've made this contract legally or whatever to say, hey, we are going to share, we're going to manage this home together,
Yeah.
then you need a partner that respects you. You need to communicate, hey, this is unequal and this is a problem and we made this agreement. And so it's a partner recognizing that there needs to be equal shared weight. It's a woman communicating. If it's not, it's ongoing work to solve that particular from a place of respect. I think far too often women are settling for, well, yeah, he's a man. He can't remember when to pick up the kids from soccer. No, nothing in the Y chromosome prevents a man from knowing pickup schedules and what soccer field they're supposed to be on. Absolutely not.
Yeah, it doesn't make you an idiot, but we
No,
give a pass to it because I don't know if you've experienced this. Are you married?
I am married. Yeah. So I have 3 kids. I've been married. It'll be 15 years next month.
Oh, wow. Congratulations. Okay. 15 years.
Yeah,
That's a long time.
it
Um,
is.
when your kids were younger, did your
Mhm.
husband ever get the, oh, you're such a good father just for doing the bare minimum type of taking
Oh,
them to the park?
100%. Yeah, like he picked them up from school once and oh my gosh, dad of the year, because there's a double standard. Or even you'll hear we used to joke about because he was like, what in the heck? If I was at work or I was out with a girlfriend on a weekend or went for a run, somebody would say, oh, you're babysitting the kids to him. And he would go, what? Like, I'm not babysitting the kids. I'm just parenting. Like, there's just completely different distinctions for men and women.
And the fact that that hasn't changed, that still is happening. I mean, like, I had a boss recently who, like, in the same breath, they'll be like, oh, I'm a feminist. I have daughters because God forbid they were a feminist before having daughters.
Yeah.
Also, they're babysitting said daughters right now. And it's just, I've heard that recently. It is
Yeah.
a really annoying
It's
thing.
still there everywhere and people don't even see it.
Yeah, and it leads to this situation where men are given a pass, or men are often
Mhm.
celebrated for showing up in previously dominated by women spaces, like being an active parent. And then
Mhm.
in the same way, I don't think women are celebrated when they show up in any other type of job. It's like, oh, are you here because you deserve to be here? It's a messed up
Yeah.
situation.
Where we started, where like, okay, so if women are now starting to say, hey, I expect you to help out. Oh, and I expect to have orgasms when we have sex. And oh, I expect for this to be
Yeah.
fun and for you to take your time a little bit more or listen to me or whatever the case may be. Then all of a sudden we're demanding or high maintenance. I had a girlfriend the other day just rage against people referring to her as high maintenance for having, I think, what are just fully rational empowered expectations of equality. And I think that's just such a shame. And she was just so saddened by that feedback.
Well, it's extremely invalidating too to hear
Yeah.
like, oh,
Yes.
your needs are actually just too much. I'd feel so unseen. I feel for her.
Yeah.
That's tough. So, for women struggling right now with having their desire met, understanding it, I mean, all of the scenarios described, how are women crawling their way out of this situation? Because I imagine it's not just like a let me stand up, step over, and I'm ready. It's a lot
Yeah.
of deconditioning, unconditioning, whatever the word is.
Yeah, I think deconditioning is really, or like re-education or
Yeah.
something. I think that is where a lot has to start. So I see a lot online, and I'm sure you do too, where the things are kind of jumping and, or like you referenced Cosmo, like the Cosmo covers I remember seeing at the grocery store when I was a teenager, like 10 tips on how to give a blowjob or something like that. We're jumping straight to how to's and like what to do and advice that I think is great, like exploring yourself and masturbating and getting to know your own body. I think those are really, really important, but they still skip over some of that unlearning and deconditioning around what is allowed, what is shameful, what is valid, what's appropriate, what's motherly, what's womanly. And so I think the first step is women having that self-awareness to dig into that, to begin to take ownership, feel empowered to say, to hell of all this conditioning, and then to go explore, read these fantasy novels, to go masturbate. And then if you're in a relationship where you feel safe and comfortable, or even if you feel a little like stuck, to be vulnerable enough to go to your partner in a non-accusatory way. I think one of the best things you can do is to go to a partner and just say, I love you so much. We've built this life together. We have kids, whatever the case may be. I feel a little stuck. I miss how we used to talk to one another. I miss how we used to touch each other. I miss how we used to feel like lovers. And I love you. And I also miss that piece of me. And I'm wondering if we can find our way together back a little bit more close to how we used to be, or not even go back to how we used to be, but create that next chapter of who we are together. I think that's such a connective conversation. It doesn't have to be like, oh, you never want to touch me anymore. That might be true, and that might be how you feel, but that's not a great way to start a conversation to get to a place where you're having more sex.
No notes. Perfect. Yeah. Perfect explanation. 100%. That makes so much sense. The not starting with, you never want this. I mean, any type of extreme, what's it called that when you
So
like,
like all or nothing
or
kind
nothing,
of,
that
yeah.
situation,
Mm-hmm.
like you always do this.
Yes.
It's just mostly false, right? So like
Right.
also you never want this. It's a really good point though, because I think there is also validity in that kind of like feeling of, oh, you never want to touch me. You don't want this on either side, not being met where you want to be met. And then naming that, but without the accusation side of it, just more being like stating the goal of where you want to end up, where you want to go together, as opposed to where you are
Exactly.
not right now. Yeah.
Exactly. And, you don't want to get into too much kind of therapy speak, but you can just sort of say, like, as opposed to, you never want to touch me anymore, is I don't feel desired and I want to be wanted and I want to want you. And you're kind of saying the same thing, but it's gentler and it's more compassionate and it's inviting in a conversation as opposed to this one-way statement that then you feel like you're on trial and it becomes this litigation of, but yes, I do want you, but you don't receive my advances, so I stopped. And then it's like, but that's not true. Again, that's not going anywhere. The goal becomes who's right as opposed to how do we have a better sex life. The goal has completely gone off the rails.
Oh, yeah. And I'm never giving up the fight of who's right.
Yeah.
But I will have a conversation around like, oh, do you want to go to this place with me? And it's like,
Right.
yeah, like how can we get there, as opposed to this is the reality of our situation right now. That's a really great point.
Yeah, that's funny. Yes. Always be right.
I jokingly say, but I'm half serious, that my kink is being told you're right, because it excites me so much to hear you're right. Literally, I get a little excited. Obviously, that's not really my kink. It's not a kink. It's a joke.
And I think you like what you like whether it's a kink or just feeling validated. Also sometimes I think we get into our heads as women and we go, well, I shouldn't need that and I shouldn't need to be affirmed all the time. We should ourselves to death. Like, I
Yeah.
should be smarter. I should know better. I should da-da-da. And I'm speaking from experience. Like, we do all of this to ourselves. And instead of just going, okay, I like being told I'm pretty. I like being told I'm wanted. And that doesn't make me less of a feminist. And it doesn't make me, less strong and less confident. It just means, hey, I like this because I like it.
Yeah.
That's enough. That's explanation enough.
I'm feeling like a weirdo right now
Oh.
because
Uh-oh.
no, it's funny. I'm just thinking like, oh, for me, it's interesting with my partner. He doesn't tell me I'm beautiful enough. And it has never
Mm.
occurred to me to not tell him. I need to hear him say that and teach him how to say that to me,
Yeah.
because I want to feel desired. And
Yeah.
I'm just realizing like that's something that I've never struggled with, nor did I have insight into the fact some people are struggling with saying, I want this, in terms of that.
Yeah.
I don't know why
Yeah.
that's just occurred to me. For me, I'm like, the struggle is not just in the fantasy, it's with basic needs sometimes.
Sometimes, yeah. Also, I think we can jump to assumptions so that if you're not hearing it enough, that person must not love you enough, think you're beautiful enough, pretty enough. And I think, I can't even remember what the specific thing was with my husband recently, but I was telling him something and he was just like, well, yeah, that's obvious. That's a given. And I was like, well, I appreciate that. Like, I think I understand that more and like have that inherently in
Yes.
me more than I do. And so, like, I actually thank you for thinking so highly of me, but I need you to say that thing to me because I still need it to come externally from you. And he was like, oh, okay, great. I thought you just knew that. And I said, thank you. And, please tell me a little bit more. And he said, okay, great. Like, he felt it all along and he was just operating under the assumption that it was totally obvious. And I knew that. And I just said, oh, I do, but it's helpful every now and again to hear it a little bit more.
I see that. That's a great example, and I'm so glad you spoke up, right?
Mm.
Because in my mind,
Yeah.
it's like, "Oh, I'm not happy." Well, on the other hand, if I'm not happy, everyone's gonna know. So in the same
Yeah.
in the same way, I think that now we've just tapped into exactly why I find it easy to
Yeah.
do it. But I recently had a similar situation where my partner, it happened like twice within a 3-day period. He was like, "You smell like potatoes," or "You smell like something else." I was like, you have never told me I smell nice, but, like, you have no problem telling, and he was like, "Well, that's because you always smell nice until you smell like
Right.
potatoes." And I'm like,
Right.
"Oh, okay, but, like, can we
Okay. Say
switch
the
it up
nice
a little?"
things too.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly, like,
exactly.
so that it's not this jarring experience when I'm told I smell like potatoes.
I think it's mostly I've heard it in sort of parenting advice, but this idea of like the feedback is often negative, stop doing this, don't do this, whatever. And they often say, like, switch that ratio, try to make it 3-to-1 or 2-to-1. Try to say, hey, I love how you draw that picture. I love how you, said please and thank you. Can we also work on picking up your room? Or something. And so, like,
Yeah.
make sure you're acknowledging the good things because I just think the royal we're bad at that. And so we're quick to point out what's not working and not as good to
Yeah.
articulate what is working.
That's a really good point, and I think most of us are gonna be guilty with that because we point out what we want changed. Like, when we're happy with the status quo, it's the status quo, so we're not saying, like, "Oh,
Hmm.
thanks for putting your dish away," or whatever it might be. Kid example.
Yeah. But I do think that's where actually interesting where couples can get into trouble if they're having a good sex life, let's say, and things are going well and they're happy. And then simply over time, things change or like this huge identity shift if you do become parents. And then they just sort of drift and you get into your routine and you start to lose sense of your sex life and it goes away and it diminishes. And that drift can happen for a variety of reasons, but one being because they never really like stated, this is good. We want this. We are prioritizing this. And so if you're not sort of articulating it and actually saying, these are the good things we like that we want to keep, this status quo piece is positive, then I think it is easier to sort of let those drift than if you're actively having those conversations, then it's just more active. It's more present. You're talking about it. And so I think you're less likely to lose it behind the scenes with all the stress.
That's a really good point. There are little things that you can do and sort of daily
Yeah.
practices and conversations you can come back to, or when
Hmm.
you take stock of what you should be thinking about or talking about, there are sort of like,
Hmm.
I guess, little hacks you can create for yourself of make sure I'm mentioning these things or bringing these things up.
Yeah. I mean, this is where you're the expert around kink, but I think communication is really critical when you're in a relationship with kink. But if you are in a quote, vanilla relationship, particularly be in a heterosexual dynamic, it's as if communication about sex is wrong, that it implies the chemistry is bad. It implies you're not meant to be whatever sort of ideas you have. And so you just find yourself in these situations where you have no idea when sex is going to happen. You're not looking forward to it. It's anxiety filled. There's no way
Yeah.
to anticipate it because you can't talk about it. You're just supposed to naturally come together and have your desires align and meet your needs without ever articulating what that's going to look like within the constraints of a busy life. It's just a setup for couples to be disappointed.
Yeah. Do you have any advice for people, not even just women, but women
Hmm.
and men in this situation where they have that anxiety around sex or this scarcity mindset around
Yeah.
sex of like, oh, I'm not getting enough of it? And how do you recommend they talk to each other about it? I'm going to just ask that question first and then I'll,
Okay.
I'll move on.
So I think you talk a lot. I think you talk outside of the bedroom.
Yeah.
I think you touch in ways that aren't leading toward sex, that aren't expecting of sex. You go back to flirting, touching, kissing, caressing, little jokes here and there throughout the day. you begin to bring up the conversation about sex throughout and integrated in your everyday life to account for the fact that we're deciding this is a priority. Just like if you decide that you're going to eat healthy, you're going to go grocery shopping a couple times a week. You're not just going to eat healthy once a month and call it a day. You're going to do this on a
Yeah.
regular basis. You're going to cook well. You're going to shop. You're going to do all of that stuff. Similarly with sex, you are just going to begin to integrate it into your day-to-day actions. And even if you've drifted from that and you feel really out of practice and it feels really clunky and it feels really awkward, I think you just start by saying, hey, this feels awkward. I feel really silly, but let's just start, just name it. I'm a big believer in just name the thing. Just be like, I feel really out of practice and this feels totally dumb. We've been married for 10 years and now I'm trying to flirt with you again. I don't even know what to do, but I'm going to try. And have both people say, okay, great. Like, I'm going to do that too. I'm going to be vulnerable with you too. And then it will start to be fun.
I love that advice. Like naming it is sort of like, when you're on a roller coaster, you're supposed to scream to let out the fear. It sort
Yes.
of calms you down. It's like, don't
Yeah.
yell it, but like just name it. Let it
Yeah.
out.
Just name it. Yeah. It lets the air out of the balloon. It's like, all right, we both feel silly. Okay, cool. Let's do this.
Yeah. Okay. The part two of this question is a little bit
Mm.
harder. Something I even struggle with as a coach is where one side very much wants the intimacy back, and the other side is like, I don't need or want this, could go the rest of our marriage without it, but also don't want to get divorced. Just no
Right.
more sex, but let's stay together and you can't have sex with anyone else. This is a
Yeah.
really common story I hear lately.
Yeah. And I've heard that too. So I also think it's common. And, people talk about like mismatched libido. So you've got one who wants sex and one doesn't. So I think there's a lot of things going on. One, I think sometimes, and let's just assume because of all the tropes and archetypes that the woman is not the one wanting sex and the man wants sex, even though I
Yeah.
know that's not always the case, but let's just go with that. So I think you have the woman that says, yeah, I don't really care, but also we're not going to have an open relationship. And so I would encourage her to go back to what we talked about. Okay, have you actually given yourself permission? Have you actually explored your body? Have you gone to the doctor? Are you in perimenopause? What's your hormonal functioning? So I think there's like some basic checkups that I would encourage her to say, hey, before you close off your whole identity as a sexual being, let's check in and see if there are ways to cultivate it back. Because to put that piece of you to rest is significant. And let's kind of think about the significance of that. We talked about the cognitive load and stuff. So I think sometimes you see relationships where the woman doesn't want sex and the man does, and they immediately jump to, well, we just have mismatched libidos. But if you open that up, you might actually go, okay, she hasn't given herself permission. Her estrogen's really low. There's a hormonal issue. The cognitive load is driving them insane and they're not connecting. They haven't been on a date in 3 years. So like before we jump to, like there's no longer going to be sex, I think it's worth exploring. You said you still love each other. You still have affection. You don't want a divorce. You don't want him going outside the marriage. So there's something that still wants you to be fully connected to him. So let's just peel the layers back around everything else that's going on in the relationship. And usually there's stuff there to dig into that at least, I think, I'm curious to hear what you think, that can at least like bring people a little closer together.
I had never really thought about going to get tested or, going to get your levels checked of hormones
Yeah.
and see what's going on. I love that advice because I'm often slow to even think, like go down that route in general. But so fully agree with you on that. And that is something I'm now going to start recommending to people of just getting it checked and talking to a professional about it. I love the idea of like, let's sit with what it means to put this to rest. And if that's what you really want, or if that is a short-term solution that is less painful and less stressful than actually going through the process of seeing if you want to fix it. Because I want to acknowledge it's a lot of work. My
Yeah.
clients put in a ton of work to find their way back to each other, and it's not easy. And it's an up and down thing. And one session is great, and the next session is no, we're back to square one. And
Yeah.
that's the path they go on. So I understand why a lot of people are like, no, I'd rather just put it to rest, especially if you're tired already, if you are exhausted
Yeah.
from life and kids. And even if you don't have those things, the exhaustion, it's a lot.
Yeah, I think that's so true. I mean, if you go to therapy, this idea of sort of like it's harder before it's better because you're unearthing stuff that's like, it is exhausting to process and talk through and introspect upon. And sometimes it's just easier to go like, yeah, I know this thing is still sort of messed up in my life, but like I'm going to deal with it and I'm just going to accept it because doing the work, as you said, is hard. So yeah, I also fully understand where people are coming from that.
Yeah, because just like you said earlier, like I think one of the first things you uncover and really magnify is, oh, I'm feeling resentment. Like, so
Yes.
you
Yeah.
uncover resentment, and
Mhm.
that is a scary beast to tackle and work through.
Yes.
So when you uncover that, and then you're like, oh, this is what I've been feeling, that
Mhm.
hump, getting over that one. And sometimes that's the first hurdle I've found, that resentment
Mhm.
feeling. That alone can be enough to scare even the strongest person away.
100%. And if you think about that, so if you have this couple coming in with quote mismatched libido, but actually what you realize is one partner resents one partner and the other doesn't. There's no resentment on this side. So the symptom is the mismatched libido. It's
Mm.
not the actual issue. It's sort of like the fever is the symptom of the underlying infection. It tells us that there's an infection. So we have this symptom, but some people are just often only solving for the mechanical, okay, well, this person wants sex all the time, this person wants none, so maybe we just agree upon once a week or something. And maybe that can help a little bit, but it's not addressing any of the underlying stuff that might be impacting the actual libido.
Thank you. Yes, that is such a
Yeah.
good point that I think is extremely relevant to so many couples of like, what are you treating here? And I am a huge fan of scheduled sex. I am a huge fan of like, start
Yes.
with that once a
Likewise.
week thing, right?
Yeah.
And
Hmm.
then it does lead into other things, but acknowledging like, hey, this is the actual root of the problem. This is what is happening, but this is a symptom of it, is
Yes,
that feeling.
exactly.
Caroline, I feel like I've kept you on longer than I expected
Oh,
to, right? Like I have had such a
it's
good
so fun. It's so
conversation.
good.
I know, I
Yeah,
love kind
good.
of like going deep on the real situations and the scary parts of the conversation that we don't always get to have out loud for fear of, I don't know
Yeah.
what the comments will be on this podcast, but I'm excited because I have a pretty much 50-50 listenership, men and women,
Oh,
which is
interesting. Okay. Yeah.
yeah, not so common, I think, on sex podcasts, depending on who's hosting. So I'm excited to read the comments on this. But is there anything that we
Yeah.
haven't touched on today that's a really important message that you like to give?
Oh, we've really gone around, and I think it's been nice. And I think the big thing around these conversations around sex is that I, at least anyway, have not found it's like a 10-second reel. There's a lot of nuance to it. There's a lot of complexity, and there's a lot to discuss, and there's a lot that goes into it. And I think if couples just start talking more, recognize that there's a lot to it, and it's not just like, wham bam and everything's great. Cultivate it, be intentional, prioritize it, give yourself chances, be curious, be silly, just embrace it and recognize that it will evolve too. Like it's not a set it and forget it. Like, great, it was good when we were 25, it's going to be good forever. No, bodies change, people change, lives change. And so it should evolve and you should evolve with it.
Again, no notes. What I'm going to say is, I think that anyone listening to this podcast, share it with your significant others, partners,
Yeah.
friends. I've never said this at the end of a podcast ever, Caroline. So I was like,
Oh,
yeah, this is like not my normal sign
so
off.
kind.
What I'm
Yeah.
gonna say is I think everyone needs to be having these conversations earlier on in their relationship. The
Yeah.
earlier the better, their view of it, how important they think it is. Because if you have two people who don't think this is a priority, this episode might not apply, but figure it
Mhm.
out together. Talk
Yeah.
about where this is on your priority list. If you are going through this, I think just even listening to this episode together could be helpful in opening up conversations, talking about
Yes.
how silly you can feel, how scary it can feel. So I would recommend if you've gotten this far, please send this to friends, partners, people who need to think or start thinking about where this is on their priority list.
100%. Yes.
Caroline, thank you so much for being here today. So you've written your book. It is eventually
Yes.
on its way. I would love to
Yeah.
have you back on when the book is out. I'm really excited for it.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I will be happy to come back on when it's published and I'll share it on all my links. And I just want conversations like these to be out in the world, to couples read the book together, have it spur intimacy. I mean, that's my hope.
Yeah. Also, unrelated, I love the word
Mm.
begets. So the fact that your
Ah,
book is titled Sex begets sex. I'm like, yes, sign me up. I love it. All right.
Great.
Thanks so much, Caroline.
You can find Caroline Hood at her website, www.desireinreallife.com, and her Substack and Instagram at desireinreallife, all one word.
If you enjoyed this episode, don't forget to subscribe, leave a review, and share it with anyone who might find it interesting. And if you have any questions or topics you'd like me to cover in future episodes, feel free to reach out. Email info@thekingconsultant.com. Until next time, keep on kinking on.